Ahlan. Right now we're going to continue talking about how to negate conjugated verbs in Arabic, and in this video we're going to focus on how to do so in a couple of colloquial dialects, Egyptian and Levantine. Once again, this video assumes that you are comfortable conjugating verbs in the past and present tense. If you feel you'd like some review, then we have a couple of other videos that address conjugation in the past and present tense. In Levantine, we're going to negate verbs using the particle ma for past and present and future tense. And in Egyptian, we're going to use a combination of ma and sh. Ma plus a sheen at the end. And we're going to kind of sandwich that verb in between. Now, I'd like to point out that while we're only addressing Levantine and Egyptian Arabic specifically, the majority of Arab dialects that you're going to encounter wherever you might be traveling or studying or working negate their verbs using some variation on this, either this exact pattern or something very, very similar. So this is information that is very transferable. Let's try a few examples just to get the idea. For example, if we want to, let's start with affirmative sentences. So if we say, in Levantine, they work in a bank. بيشتغلوا ببنك. Right, and let's put the same sentence in Masri right underneath it. It's nearly identical, right? We only have a difference in the preposition. Right, two sentences nearly identical. We're going to negate them a little bit differently though, depending on our dialect. In Shami, in Levantine, in order to negate that sentence, we would simply need to add a ma at the beginning. Ma بيشتغلوا ببنك. They don't work at a bank, they work someplace else, we don't know where. In Masri, what we would need to do is say ma بيشتغلوش في bank. Right? We would add that sheen to the end. Perhaps we would get rid of that alif. Again, there's no standard orthography for dialect, so if you're reading a dialect in some context or other, on the internet for example, or in an ad, you might expect some slight variation. Another example, we drink tea. Why not? بنشرب الشاي. Same thing in Egyptian and in Levantine, right? So in Levantine, all I would need to do is say ما بنشرب الشاي. We don't drink tea. And in Masri, once again, I would need to sandwich this conjugated verb in between a ma and a shin. ما بنشرب الشاي. Notice that we're not putting that sheen all the way at the end of the sentence. We're just sandwiching that verb that we're negating in between the ma and the shin. In the past tense, it's the same thing. So let's just take one example. If we wanted to say, he studied literature. درس الأدب. Right? In Shami, we add that ma. ما درس الأدب. He didn't study literature. And in Masri, we would tack that sheen on to the end. ما درسش الأدب. And we need to hear that scene clearly so we can understand what verb we're talking about, درس, to study, and we need to hear the sheen. So you might want to practice that. So it can be a little bit of a tongue twister if you're not used to it. ما درسش الأدب. I want to focus a little bit on how to negate to want in Arabic. You might remember that we have a separate video on how to talk about wanting and expressing the verbal idea of wanting in Arabic. And in formal Arabic, we have a conjugated verb arada, yurid, to express the idea of wanting, but in many dialects we have a slightly different word, and Egyptian and Levantine are no exception. So you might remember that in Egyptian we have an ism fa'il, right, an active participle, ayiz, or sometimes awiz, ayiz, and then to refer to a specific person, we might need to add a feminine ending, right, hiya, ayiza, or as a plural, hum, ayizin. Whereas in Shami we have the prefix bid, to which we attach something that really resembles the possessive suffixes that we know. So if I wanted to say I want, I would say biddi, and if I wanted to say she wants, I would need to say bidha, etc. So we negate these in slightly different ways. In Shami, if, let's say, I want to say, I want to go to the movies, I could say بدي أروح السينما. I want to go to the movies. And if I want to negate that idea, negate the wanting, the بدي of it, then I can just use ما بدي أروح السينما, or هي ما بدها تروح السينما, right? But to negate this wanting, and we only need to negate that first verb, right? I don't need to negate the going either, right? I don't want to go. Just like in English, we don't need to negate every single verb in a string of verbs in a sentence. Now in Masri, we need to do things a little bit differently, because ayiz, ayiza, ayizin is an active participle, right? That ism fa'il. So we're going to negate it as though it is a noun. Someone or something is not a wanter of whatever. So if we take the same sentence in Masri, I want to go to the movies, we could say أنا عايز أروح السينما. Now we need to use the particle مش, which you'll recognize as this ma and shin smooshed together, right? So we're going to plonk it right in front of عايز. أنا مش عايز أروح السينما. هي مش عايزة تروح السينما, right? She doesn't want to go to the cinema. So we don't sandwich the عايز the same way we do with a conjugated verb, because it isn't technically a conjugated verb, right? These wanting particles in Shami and Levantine have slightly different rules, so we can't apply verb conjugation exactly, even though they have a verbal meaning, especially in English, right? We think of them as verbs. In Arabic, they're not quite. They're sort of their own thing. One last thing, if we want to negate the future, in Arabic, we do have a little bit of variation. If you've studied the other video that we have on the future tense, you'll know that we have very simple particles for indicating the future that we tack onto a conjugated verb right before it. In Shami, we're usually going to add a rah right onto the beginning of that verb. And in Masri, we're going to add, gotta keep my colors straight. In Masri, in Egyptian, we're more likely to add a ha, right? So if we want to indicate, for example, that we will definitely go to the movies, I will go to the movies. In Shami, I can reuse my sentence here and add rah. But if I want to negate that, then I can just use ma rah ruh, right? So I have the ma that's negating the future and the verb. Ma rah ruh al cinema. I will not go I am not going to go to the cinema. In Masri, we're going to do something slightly different, right? We have our ha, I will go, and I'm going to put a mish, right? Again, that machine unites together, and I can say mish haruh al cinema. I'm not going to go to the movies. So that is how we would negate the future in Shami and in Masri.